Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix. I think a lot about dissociation, and I feel like I started to understand it from an artistic and psychological point of view, a representational point of view, whenever I watch the show Mr. Robot, where dissociation is a major theme, and how interesting that is. But actually, it seems that dissociative tendencies were imprinted on me when I was very young, to the point to where what I experienced in difficult situations led to me actually dissociating. And while dissociation is a strong term, it is relevant to my situation in that I have experienced similar things as the character Mr. Robot, or not even just Mr. Robot, but Elliot in Mr. Robot, but how I feel like I understood what was going on probably long before I saw that show, or at least was starting to, as dissociation is a theme in my book, The Street Kid, and the other books I've written where Phoenix is a major character. But the reason why I've been thinking about it a lot is because I think it's a powerful thing to think about, of what's going on with our minds. Whenever this happens, the idea of a mind literally splitting, the idea of there being multiple personalities. And I've been lucky enough to where I don't actually split to where I literally become a different person. But there are definitely a lot of situations where it's gotten pretty close, where for whatever reason my unconscious mind takes over and I become someone else. Now, with thinking about it, from possibly a materialist point of view, thinking about it from the point of psychology, I think what's going on is it's not that you literally become a different person. It's not that you literally have another personality. And maybe this is complicated when we think about how it impacts other people and their prognosis or their diagnosis and what that means. But at least for me, what I would say is I would take the Jungian approach and say that for me, it was the issue of needing to be able to integrate parts of myself that were in denial and what that meant. The parts of myself that I didn't know how to integrate, but that I was working to integrate, and that had taken over me, basically. And the reason why this is super interesting to me is because of what it tells me about my mind and about the mind in general, which is that, of course, we want to try to integrate all parts of ourselves, but this can be very difficult to do because those parts of ourselves are fighting, or because they are repressed by society or other forces, even just the environment. But human nature is very deep, and the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, for that matter, are very deep, because they're expressions of something that is suppressed or repressed, and that is really difficult to bring out, which is why in cases like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's such an extreme contrast between the very kind Dr. Jekyll and the intensely murderous Mr. Hyde, and how important that is to think about, in that basically it's extreme because these other parts of ourselves are often the shadow parts of ourselves, which is why I like the Jungian approach as a kind of prescription of you need to integrate these parts of yourself if you're to be whole. And that's difficult work to do, but it's important. So anyway, an analogy that I would use to think about the way in which I dissociated and the way in which I understand my experiences with schizophrenia is that of the snake angel, who is a character in my book, The Street Kid, and many other books that I've written related to that series and that series of characters. And the snake angel was literally a part of me that I wrote about, but that at the time literally embodied me. And it was such a complicated experience because I didn't really understand it. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know why I was becoming a different person. This person of which was very much focused on lust and primal emotions and primal sensations, and even a primal thought, where there was this whole built-in universe that came out of this whole personality. And of course, if we talk about this from the perspective of fantasy or speculative fiction, you might get into the territory where it's okay, these are just metaphors, these are just symbols. But in real life, it can be a lot more jarring to try to figure out. And the reason is because you don't really know what these parts are. You feel like they could be different characters or spirits or forces, but you have to take on the kind of scientific viewpoint of it to survive, I feel. And so it often minimizes the importance or the power of the dissociation, but at least I'm able to look at it in a practical way of like, this is a part of me that I'm dealing with or have dealt with, and that is who I am, and being okay with all the parts of myself. But that can be really difficult to do because of the way in which we are suppressed or repressed, and the way in which we dissociate as a kind of rebellious sense. I know that that's what was happening with me when I was younger. Was I was tired of the hypocritical systems around me, and I wanted to express myself. And it definitely led to a lot of issues, but that's what I'm working on to this day to be able to try to understand. But the reason why the concept of dissociation appeals to me as a metaphor or as an analogy is because I think there are these parts of ourselves that we don't understand. There's these parts of ourselves that are deeply rooted, these parts of ourselves that are mysterious and that we want to allow to see the light of day, but that we often don't allow, or that we can't allow. And I'm not even talking about darker impulses. So I do worry about the shadow as being seen as this like very murderous dark side, but it can really just be any kind of personality trait or personality feature that has difficulty expressing itself. And this could just be in terms not of anything controversial, but just in terms of ideas. And so while there's definitely a reality that we confront and that we resist, that can lead to the desire to dissociate, even if it's just the unconscious mind processing it, it seems to me that what's important here is to recognize that the dissociation possibly comes about because of all of the pressures of society and the fact that civilization might actually suppress some of our most important instincts. And I think that's what's really fascinating about it. So when I think about my own mind and my experiences, I recognize the way in which my mind is always trying to tell me something with these patterns. You could take the Freudian view and say we are limited by society and by civilization from understanding our deeper instincts. And I think this is actually a pretty deeply rooted thing, at least in me, because I know that I want to be who I am, but I also know that there are a lot of social norms. And it's not even necessarily that you want to, so to speak, give in to these impulses or give in to the other personalities or the other forces, but it just seems so much that there's this whole reality of like, this is a part of you. And it doesn't have to be seen in this antagonistic sense, but I think it often does because we are at war with ourselves. And so what I hope to convey with this idea of dissociation and what I'm talking about here is that I recognize for myself what it reveals to me about my own mind, which is that my mind is unconscious, that there are parts of myself that I may never understand. When we talk about a discontinuous identity, this is part of what I mean with dissociation, is that we aren't the same. We are someone else. And that what we think is consistent across time is actually not at all because of what splits or what separates. And I just love that metaphor because I think it tells me that there's a lot of deeper things to explore about our psyche. And at least for me, what it helps me to understand about my own psyche, what I'm trying to convey, what I'm trying to do, and helping me understand what it really is, who I really am, and what it is that I'm really trying to say and do, and understanding the deeper level of these parts of myself that I may not understand, that can represent the mystery of the universe and the mystery of the human mind. Like I said, this kind of unconscious part of ourselves or a black box, but how important it is that I think that we engage with that side of reality, that side of our mind, the way in which we understand who we are, or at least try to understand, and how important it is to ask those questions. So yeah, I'm Phoenix. I hope you enjoyed this talk. I hope that you'll check out my other videos and check out my books. And yeah, hit that like button, subscribe, share. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. I will see you next time.